Tales of horror. More ethnic Albanians flee Kosovo, leveling new charges of atrocities on the part of the Serbs. The pilot of a U.S. warplane lost over Serbia is rescued and returned safely to Allied territory. Remembering the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident 20 years later. And diamond diplomacy. The Orioles and Cuba slug it out on a field in Havana.
This is the CBS Evening News with John Roberts.
Good evening. It is day 5 of Operation Allied Force, and airstrikes against Yugoslavia are intensifying. NATO launched more than 50 warplanes from the base at Aviano, Italy this afternoon. They are going after Serb forces who are carrying out what one NATO official calls genocide against Kosovo Albanians. The rescued pilot of that downed U.S. stealth fighter was returned to Italy and is reported ready to resume his duties. And as all this is happening, 3 Russian politicians, including a former prime minister, have arrived in Belgrade on what they say is a peace mission. On the ground in Kosovo, Serbian troops are reported to be routing ethnic Albanians from villages and now cities, sending a flood of refugees across the borders into neighboring Albania, Montenegro, and Macedonia. The NATO bombing was intended to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe, but as Alan Pizzi reports, it may have, at least for the time being, worsened it.
This is what NATO bombing has won so far, a long, dismal line of refugees driven from their homes by the Serbs. Over the weekend alone, 14,000 ethnic Albanians fled Kosovo, according to the UN Refugee Agency. They took all the men and killed them, this woman says. They put pistols on people's throats and said, "We will not allow your children to see Kosovo. We will kill you all." The Serbs appear to be ethnic cleansing on a monumental scale. Reliable reports from Pristina say leaflets signed by the Serb prefect of Kosovo order all ethnic Albanians to leave for Macedonia. There are also credible reports that ethnic Albanian men who worked for humanitarian relief agencies and the international monitors are being hunted down. Refugees crossing the Macedonian border today had hidden for days before taking the chance of making a run for it. Even safely across the border, they were afraid to be identified. What sort of things happened?
They're collecting people during the night, killing them, slaughtering them.
Only NATO ground troops, he says, can save Kosovo. And if no troops come, what will happen?
Only mighty God knows that.
What do you think?
They will kill plenty of Albanians there.
And NATO bombings haven't stopped the Serb offensive against Kosovo Liberation Army guerrillas, according to a spokesman reached by satellite telephone.
We are still fighting. We have ammunition, but we don't have enough to take them back, to break them.
Refugees have so little left, they are reliant on charity for food. But that's still better than being trapped in Kosovo. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Skopje.
Airstrikes against Yugoslavia are in what NATO is calling Phase 2, now targeting Yugoslav tanks, troops, and weapons. On the last day of Phase 1, yesterday, the Serbs scored a propaganda coup when a high-tech American stealth fighter went down. David Martin at the Pentagon reports the celebrating may be short-lived.
F-117 stealth fighters took off again from Italy this evening as NATO launched a 5th night of strikes which NATO officials vowed would do serious damage to the Serb army.
We are increasingly switching our attention to the military thugs who are causing such misery and suffering directly at Milosevic's orders. And let them get this message, because we are going to hit them hard.
The stealth fighter that went down last night appears to have been hit by a Serb anti-aircraft missile. It was the first stealth aircraft ever lost in combat, but the pilot was rescued.
He's in great shape. He's back in a NATO facility right now and continue to carry on with his military duties.
The primary military duty is to keep up the bombing until Serb President Milosevic cries uncle.
We intend to continue to wage this air campaign until we're satisfied that we have sufficiently degraded and damaged his military capability.
NATO showed off before and after pictures as evidence Serbia has been hit hard.
Here you'll see the arrows depicting the targets, and now quite clearly you'll see those targets very effectively taken out.
But that has not stopped the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo and probably won't until aircraft like this A-10 start hitting not just ammo dumps and headquarters buildings, but the troops that are doing the killing.
They'll feel the heat as quickly as we can apply it to them, believe me, and then hopefully we'll start seeing a difference.
The only other way to stop the killing would be to send in ground troops, and U.S. officials said again today they have no intention of doing that. Even if they did, Pentagon officials say it would take a month to move troops into Kosovo. John?
David Martin at the Pentagon, thanks. The pilot of the stealth fighter that went down was picked up by an elite search and rescue team on hot standby anytime U.S. planes fly into harm's way. Tom Fenton at the Aviano Air Base in Italy reports pilots' lives are very often in their hands. Tom?
John? Well, here at the center of the operation, the pace of the aerial campaign has not been affected by the loss of the plane. Pilots here are undaunted by the loss of the stealth and relieved at the rescue of their fellow pilot.
No, look at that. The pictures of the wreckage of the downed stealth fighter are a grim reminder of how much worse it could have been. Aboard every plane launched from Aviano tonight was a pilot with heightened awareness not only of this mission's danger, but also of the capabilities of an extraordinary unit standing by should the worst occur. The search and rescue teams have a single focus: locate downed air crew and bring them home alive. As seen in this Defense Department training video, the men are equipped with small arms, first aid gear, and electronic means to home in on the pilot's radio signals. What the video doesn't show is the extreme danger of operating behind lines in a race against the enemy to find a single man. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure last night would have meant a captured American pilot on display, if not something far worse. Air Force Captain Scott O'Grady was rescued in a similar mission after being brought down over Bosnia in 1995.
They are the true heroes, from the rescue team especially, and then also the medical corps team that took care of me. They're just unbelievable.
The search and rescue teams may be busy in the coming days in planning this operation. The Pentagon figured it might lose as many as 12 aircraft. John?
Tom Fenton at the Aviano Air Base in Italy. Thanks. At his White House press conference 10 days ago, President Clinton warned that U.S. pilots might be shot down. But he is not letting the psychological impact of yesterday's stealth fighter loss sway his course. Scott Pelley at the White House has the latest on the president's thinking. Scott?
John, a White House official referring to the downed plane told us today that's going to happen again, and the American people need to be prepared for it. For his part, the president reminded the nation today of the danger, but at the same time, he signaled his strong support for the expanding assault.
From the outset, I have said to the American people that this military operation entails real risks. But the continued brutality and repression of the Serb forces further underscores the need for NATO to persevere.
Top advisors briefed Mr. Clinton today on the new phase of the air campaign that targets Serbian forces in Kosovo. The Secretary of State argued that this is an urgent response to an accelerating genocide.
There are terrible reports about men and women, men being separated from women and children, then they being taken off and executed, villages being torched, people arriving across the border with no shoes and literally told to leave their villages. So it is a very, very bad scene.
Still, there are questions about whether this very bad scene is made worse by the bombing itself.
The Allied bombing driving the atrocities, sir? Absolutely not, he said. It is impossible to know precisely what is happening in Kosovo. NATO today estimated 50,000 refugees had been evicted in just the last week, but those estimates are based on aerial reconnaissance and the stories of the refugees themselves. John?
Scott Pelley, thanks. In the middle of an anti-NATO protest today at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, gunmen tried to attack the building with a grenade launcher. The gunman dropped the weapon when Russian police opened fire on his Jeep. Another gunman returned fire with an automatic rifle before the Jeep raced away. No one was hurt. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, a fast-spreading computer virus has experts scrambling this weekend. Also, the future of nuclear power 20 years after 3 Mile Island. And sisters take the court and make tennis history. new and menacing computer bug that could be lurking in your email inbox. The Melissa virus replicates so quickly, it's been knocking out email systems all weekend. It apparently won't damage files, but breaches security by sending open Microsoft Word documents to up to 50 people in a computer's address book. It was 20 years ago today that the name 3 Mile Island entered our vocabulary. The accident at the Pennsylvania nuclear power plant terrified area residents and shook the nuclear industry. Jeffrey Kaufman looks at what has changed after 2 decades and $1 billion cleanup.
In the cold, driving rain at 4 o'clock this morning, anti-nuclear demonstrators were determined to keep alive the memory of America's most harrowing nuclear accident. Exactly 20 years ago, a stuck valve drained cooling water from the brand new 3 Mile Island reactor number 2. The uranium core overheated and contaminated water flooded the reactor's basement.
Stay indoors with your windows closed.
In the confusion and panic that followed, residents with young children were told to evacuate. Days later, they were assured that in fact no radiation escaped. All was okay. Lisa Nagel was an 11-year-old schoolgirl when the accident happened. Today, she and her family still live in the shadow of 3 Mile Island.
I was scared. I was scared, just like anybody would be. You know, you're sitting there in 3 Mile Island's only how many miles away from you, and your parents are telling you to get your stuff together and to go.
What happened here 20 years ago didn't just change this corner of Pennsylvania. It forever changed America's attitudes towards nuclear energy. Depending who you ask, 3 Mile Island marks the end of nuclear power or a new beginning.
The legacy of 3 Mile Island is that the industry has enhanced its operations, its safety, its reliability.
Well, we've learned from that place that nuclear power is dead. There hasn't been a reactor ordered since '78. There won't be another reactor ordered. It's over.
With cheaper energy alternatives now available, America's 103 nuclear units now face extinction.
I think in the U.S. they just grew up too fast, too big, too soon.
3 Mile Island's reactor number 1 is about to become the first nuclear plant sold in this country for a fraction of its book value, in part because of that mothballed reactor next to it, a monument to the contaminated dream of what was to be a clean, safe, nuclear-powered age. Jeffrey Kaufman, CBS News, Middletown, Pennsylvania.
After a 40-year timeout, Major League Baseball returned to communist Cuba today. Fidel Castro naturally had the best seat in the house. Also watching are Byron Pitts as a Cuban team and the Baltimore Orioles played a 3-2 thriller that was much more than just a ball game.
On a sun-soaked day in Cuba, history and a homer. America's national pastime versus Cuba's national passion. The last time this happened, Fidel Castro's beard was black, the revolution was young. Not since 1959 has an American Major League Baseball team played in Havana. A moment not lost in a group of U.S. school kids. The Orioles charted in for the game.
You're playing baseball in Cuba, and like you don't really understand that for like a month. Because, I don't know, it's just happening. It overwhelms you.
It's an opportunity for both worlds to see each other's like faces.
And Cubans like Gladys Galvez like what they saw.
It's good for both countries, and I believe that it's going to be opening after this. This is going to make history.
Many hope it'll be a chance for democracy to grow in Cuba, despite recent crackdowns by Castro against dissidents who oppose his one-party rule.
Nixon went to China with the ping pong. Maybe this starts as Nixon made
ping pong for China, baseball for Cuba.
I think so. It is a way to get better relations between Cuba and States.
In an exhibition game, the score isn't supposed to matter, but this isn't an ordinary game, and everything matters.
It took the Orioles extra innings in almost 4 hours to finally take the lead for good against the Cuban All-Star team. The major leaguers admitted afterwards they were surprised by the caliber of Cuban baseball. The question now, what did the leaders learn? And will anything between Havana and Washington change? Byron Pitts, CBS News, Havana.
Next up on the CBS Evening News, just say no. The parents who object to childhood inoculations and the sibling rivalry for a coveted tennis trophy. welcome the vaccination of their children against disease. A small but vocal number of parents view immunization measures with suspicion. That's tonight's Sunday Cover, a grassroots campaign against vaccination in an independent-minded corner of America.
You guys like pizza?
Eric and Constance Grieger's top priority is keeping their children healthy. But their prescription for preventing disease could be deadly.
We educated ourselves on what the benefits and the risks would be by not immunizing and by immunizing, and thought it would be best if we didn't immunize.
Vaccines have virtually eliminated polio, tetanus, diphtheria, and whooping cough in the Western world. But after their 3 older children had what the Griegers say were adverse reactions to some of the vaccines, they decided, against popular wisdom, not to immunize their younger children.
I guess I get tired of being called somebody who's neglecting my children or jeopardizing the life of my children. I don't feel like I should have to continue to say why I'm not doing this. If there is some sound reason why I should immunize my children, I would like to have it.
And the Griegers are not alone. For years, Idaho has claimed one of the nation's lowest immunization rates among young children, in part because of decisions like the Griegers, and also because some parents simply don't recognize the benefit of vaccinations.
As people become less aware of what happens when someone gets polio or gets diphtheria, and parents tend to not validate the importance and the prioritization of getting immunizations.
The majority of Idaho's school children have been vaccinated against preventable diseases. But significant outbreaks of whooping cough have prompted the creation of a statewide registry to track which children have been immunized.
This just makes it far easier for the parents to properly maintain that record and know when it's time to get that next shot.
Idaho's Governor Dirk Kempthorne's goal is to make the information in the database readily available to the medical community.
It is totally a voluntary program. It has the absolute integrity of confidentiality.
But it's been a tough sell among some of Idaho's ultra-conservative watchdog groups.
There is a strong feeling in Idaho about government intervention. Idaho families do not feel that they need government help to send them a reminder to get their children immunized.
The Grieger family believes the immunization registry is an invasion of privacy.
I don't want anybody looking in at our family and wanting information that's not necessary. I think the hidden agenda is to use the registry to find out who's not immunizing. You're free.
And they will continue to defend their decision not to vaccinate their children.
My father had polio. I have grown up with the risk factors held above my head. I've done the reading. I've looked at the studies. I've looked at both sides of the issue. I am not walking into this blindly. And so there's just no reason for me to immunize my children and take the risk.
For the record, 1 out of every 3,000 children who contract measles will die. For whooping cough, the death rate is 1 in 200.